Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. We're so excited to be here with you today. And we're going to dive into a really powerful and exciting topic. We're going to be talking about free will versus divine will. And I know this has been something that internally I've been going back and forth with my entire experience as I've been diving into my spiritual journey. And I know Ava has as well, and we've actually been discussing this topic in the depths of our own understanding of it, to the how far our personal consciousness has expanded to understand this, and we've actually landed on the same understanding of it. And so we're actually going to dive into this, and we're also going to bring in Diana, and part of the Living Mob, Pleiadian, being that Ava channels. We're going to be bringing in her to discuss this in more depths of the higher consciousness, and to understand this in a deeper way, and to really gain a deeper embodiment of this information. But Ava and I are going to dive into it through the human perspective of it first. And so thank you for being here today with me, Ava. Do you want to dive into the download that we were just talking about around free will and divine will?
Yeah, it's such a fascinating conversation. And I know that, both of us have been, seeing clients, one-on-one for years, in groups, retreats, all these different things that we've held containers for. And I can't tell you how many times this topic or this conversation comes up and is a real, I don't know if I would go so far as to say struggle for people, but it is a curious question. It is something that people ask. Comes up when people are really diving into their intuition of, like, how do I know if this is coming from my ego, or how do I know if this is coming from source, creator, God, universe, and what's the difference, and what is the intersect there, and how does this all actually work? And before we even hit record, Shiloh and I are going and diving into some of these questions. And, this isn't the first time you've probably even heard this topic, right? And so I feel like a lot of times when I've heard others talk on this topic, it's really stays on the level of, well, you just feel into your heart and all is well, right? You just know when you know, right? And it's like how you know when you're supposed to marry somebody, right? Like you just know something in you just gets it, and you just know it's from God and not your ego. It's just this, what feels like a piece is missing from the conversation. And so we're here to kind of maybe shed a little bit of light on, through our lens and through the Pleiadian lens of what is really some of these pieces that maybe go a little bit not spoken, or a little bit not as elaborated on as they could be. And right before we hit record, Shiloh was like, I just had this download of kind of how this all works. And she's explaining it to me, and I was just like, this is really fascinating, because this is exactly this. You're literally describing a vision that I've had around this topic as well. And so it's just fascinating. It doesn't surprise me that we're coming to a similar understanding of, how it all works. And not to say that we have the authority on this topic at all, or that we know for any certainty, but about anything, like, who does? And it's a great question. It's great to talk about. It's great to get other insights and perspectives, because that's the whole point of life, is to really hear different perspectives on the same topic, right? So that's what we're here to offer today, is just a different perspective. And it's fascinating that there's so much overlap. But really, Shiloh was sharing, just about how when you're moving through the place of free will and divine will, and how they intersect. Shiloh, you were literally saying that through every choice point, there's a divine design that gets created, and then comes off that choice point, and then that just exists as a frequency until another choice point is made, right? And as she's talking about this, I'm saying, wow, this is really fascinating, because the vision that I had was literally like, if you can imagine, just for simplicity's sake, that the entire universe is this flower of life, right? It's I've got one over here, but it's all over our design. You can see it on the actual podcast for those of you that are maybe on YouTube. It's the flower of life, right? It's the concentric circles all around. And just imagine that it's some kind of beautiful sacred geometry, and it's folding in on itself all the time. And you can imagine consciousness, all of our little moments of consciousness getting to literally choose from each intersection is then a point of free will choice, where we get to choose which direction on the pattern we want to go, and hence have a different experience, right? And as we make those choice points, we literally illuminate or light up that portion of the sacred design of consciousness, of life that's flowing through. And in the same way that we have, neurons in our brain connecting in all these different ways, it doesn't mean all these other neurons don't exist. It just means that that's when we're choosing to light up in this moment. And then all of a sudden, all of this consciousness is now illuminated and gets to be experienced through this particular lens or perspective called Shiloh or called Ava or called whatever it may be. And the other fascinating part about it all is as this spiral, or as this design is kind of folding on itself through sound, through frequency, and through experience, we're actually getting to experience that on multiple planes of existence simultaneously in slightly different ways. And that's where you hear people talk about parallel realities, right? And parallel levels of experience happening through slight variations. And I know Shiloh and I have both had very visceral, very real experiences of having multiple timelines being activated and having actual experiences kind of moving through timelines, almost feeling like there's like this liminal space activated where it's like, what timeline are we even on? And are we experiencing two at once? And what is actually happening? I don't know, Shiloh, I can tell you're chomping at the bit to jump in here, because you've had some pretty wild moments. I don't know if you want to share anything, but it's just an interesting way that, I'm not asking for the whole story, obviously, but just how real this all is, and how much of a player we are in our own reality, and the choice points that we're making, and the way that we tend to separate, because we are in this third reality of duality, where we tend to separate my will and thy will, or divine will and ego will, as if they're two very distinct things, two very separate things. And that's really the question that I want to pose, is how separate are they really? And are they actually separate at all? And if so, where does that separation happen? Because you can say at some point, it is all one. So where does the separation or differentiation even happen in this conversation?
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you for sharing all of that, because, I heard you say in the beginning of like, a struggle for some people, maybe it's not really a struggle, but it definitely has been for me. Like, this has been something where, if you know anything about astrology, I have a lot of placements in Scorpio and Gemini. So it's diving deep into the mind. It's diving deep into, spirituality and understanding these concepts. And it's why I've devoted my life to understanding all of this, so that, I can bring this to the collective. And I know Ava has as well. And just, that piece of what you shared of like, how separate is it actually, right? Because every time, even in the download that I was sharing of having this vision and you having this vision, right, of making a choice. And from that choice point, there is this design that comes off of that, this divine design, which is also why there can be an infinite amount of experiences and realities. And something that I've experienced through my meditations has been, we actually surf consciousness through all of these different dimensions and all of these different timelines. And sometimes these timelines merge together, right? And sometimes we get glimpses of these timelines merging together, which is deja vu, right? It's like, oh, I feel like I've been here before. I feel like I've experienced this. Like, what is actually happening here, right? It's this merging, this bridging, and then this kind of coming back again. And for us to understand this with the analytical mind, it just like, I don't want to say it won't ever happen, but the vastness of the design of our reality is much more what the human mind, at least where it is right now, right? And, maybe as we go through this evolution in human consciousness, we plug in some more strands of DNA, I'm sure then the mind is going to expand, because neurons are actually infinite, right? And as Ava was speaking into, seeing it lighting up like neurons. And so I'm sure the expansion is there eventually for the human mind to catch up as we're learning and discovering, right? Because we can even dive into quantum physics in this, and how science is actually starting to prove the multiple realities and dimensions and universes. And, and we can bring in Diana in a little bit to kind of dive a little bit deeper into this. But, my understanding and my own experience in this has been, so expansive to understand how we really move through reality and how we really, even quantum leap, right? This is a buzzword that we hear a lot of, quantum leaping into the higher timeline. Well, when we're moving through timelines, right, there's a possibility of leaving that old dimension altogether and coming into a new reality, a new dimension, or not even a new dimension, right? Merging with another alternate version or experience or timeline, however we want to say it. And so we're starting to understand a little more how all of this works. And we can take a look at the universal laws in this as well, of, okay, well, that question that you had asked of how much separation is there, right? If we're looking at universal laws of the universal law of cause and effect, right? And so when we make a choice, and that choice then has an effect to it, and there could be implications coming back from that. Well, there always are, right? There's always a kind of a coming back from whatever we put out is coming back, right? In similar aspect. And so we can look at that as, if you're making good choices, there's going to be good opportunities and more desirable things coming back. But if we're maybe making, and I don't even want to say wrong choices, because I even believe that when we make, I'm saying in quotations, a mistake, that even that is part of the divine design, because as you make that choice, there's then a design for a lesson, and that then to come back, and maybe we can even look at that as like a karmic lesson coming back from a choice point that we had made. And so looking at all of this of, even speaking all of this out, it's like, how much free will do we actually have? And I feel like this is just going to be a question for Diana, because
Mhm.
my humanness is trying to understand. And there's also this like spark and fire that just ignites in me when I'm asking this question, right?
Mhm.
There's a something in me that knows the answer, and then is almost pulling me to continue to understand and open that box a little more, to really to not even understand with the mind. It's like an embodiment that's happening through this understanding.
Absolutely. I love how you just kind of wove all that together. And I've even heard Diana talk a little bit about how when you think about something, when you even entertain a possibility or an idea, say your best life ever, or a version of yourself that you could only literally quote unquote dream of, right? She's like, just by you entertaining the thought actually creates the timeline for it to exist. So
Mm,
that's how powerful of creators we actually are in this storyline here, is that we actually create timelines. They literally appear through our thought forms, and that literally begins to somehow weave into everything we're just talking about the pattern and the geometrical patterning of life, and our ability to weave through this in such a beautiful and really poetic way, right? And so I'm curious to hear her perspective on all this as well, because it feels like I can just feel we're going to have some illumination here on some of this, how this all interweaves. And it's a really interesting question. I spent a full 7-year cycle and then a second 7-year cycle, kind of in an ashram like environment, where I was meditating several hours a day, and really kind of diving into some of these topics of, and literally sitting and quieting the mind, right, and learning how to work with that level of quote unquote mind, right, and like what that actually even is, and what comes through in that space when you begin to kind of work into these levels of quote unquote surrender. And even that question of like, well, what does it mean to surrender? Like, what are you surrendering? What are you surrendering to or for? And as you kind of dive into that, I feel like it's all of these inquiries that we're sharing right now are all kind of pointing to the same the same thing, right? Like it's like this, like what you were saying, Shiloh, just kind of like leaning in to this space of deeply understanding yourself, right? Deeply understanding who we are as consciousness, as human beings in a dimensional experience, and as co-creators of the divine will, right? Unfolding in every moment, and how that all interplays and interweaves. And I'm just excited for it. I'm here for the ride, man. This is going to be a hot conversation. And I know that it's one that a lot of you have asked about, a lot of you are curious about, and a lot of you have heard many angularities on this question probably before. And so I'm excited to bring in a Pleiadian perspective on this, and really hear from, this is a 13th dimensional field perspective that we're about to make contact with, and really hearing from that 13th dimensional field, like, how does all this interweave, right? Like that's the 13th dimensional field is also where your higher self is. And Shiloh and I you're just sharing about this, Shiloh, off camera, about the higher self and how that all weaves together within this context of free will. I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that this is actually something that I heard stated from Robert Edward Grant, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's who said this, was his understanding or discovery, right, of this concept of free will versus divine will. What he spoke on was maybe free will is actually just the free will of our higher self, because our higher self actually has this higher perspective of seeing what's laid out and what is in the highest and best for us, of that design of, okay, if we make this choice point, they can see from this 13th dimensional perspective that there is then going to be this choice point laid out, or this divine design laid out from that choice, seeing kind of this overview perspective that maybe we can't fully see here down through the through the egoic mind, or even when we're tapping into and in the embodiment of our higher self, right? We can get glimpses, we can feel, we can sense, and even tune in to the higher channelings that want to come through. But of course, the higher self residing up there all the time doesn't have the noise, doesn't have, right, these conditions, or even the limiting beliefs, or the noise of the mind, right? And I know this is something that we were talking about it as well, is like, how do we, and I heard you speak on this earlier, right, of like the mind versus the higher mind, right? It's the kind of the duality of these aspects of the mind, of how do we learn to utilize this mind here, the human mind, as the tool that it's actually meant to be, and utilize it when there is, purpose for utilizing that. And how can we then surrender more into hearing the higher mind in those aspects of maybe even asking for clarity, or making the decision of what is the next best step available for me at this time, and gaining clarity in that sense. And you're speaking of spending time in the ashram, and I had spent some time in a monastery in northern Thailand, in Chiang Mai, and something, I did a 10-day silent vipassana there. And a lot of people in the beginning were sharing, the monkey mind. How do I shut off this monkey mind? And I know that's a big question for a lot of people, right? It's like, well, how do I know what is my mind and what is the higher mind, right? And we were kind of talking about this back and forth a little bit, of it's not so much shutting that mind down, right? Because anything that you resist persists. And what was actually shared to me in the temple by one of the nuns that was actually there, what she had shared was that we can look at the mind, right, when we're trying to quiet the mind down to actually hear the higher mind. It's almost as if you can think of, right, a neighbor banging on the door and knocking and getting louder. If you ignore it, right, it's most likely going to get a little louder. Like, I can see you in the kitchen, it's like a family member. They're not giving up, right? They're knocking. They're like, I can clearly see you standing in there. Like, I'm not going away. And so, right, she's explaining, she's at the stove and she's, stirring her soup, and it's at this vital part where she can't leave the stove. Otherwise, the soup, won't turn out. And she explains that if you acknowledge, right, the neighbor or the family member at the door, which is the mind, right? It's all of the thoughts, all of the noise, all of the clutter that's happening. If you acknowledge it, like, oh, I'm acknowledging this thought. I'm not resisting, right? What you resist persists, but you acknowledge it, you don't attach to it, and you allow it to release, right? It's this kind of coming in and coming out. The more that you do that, you allow for these thoughts to flow, right? The energetic flow, which is also, part of universal law of not attaching, right? Not resisting, but actually being in this energetic flow of your own mind. That will start to allow these thoughts to come in, noticing them, okay, releasing. What tends to happen is when we attach to a thought. When I was sharing with Ava this morning, I had something come up when I was in the shower getting ready where I actually attached to a thought that was coming through, and it put me into a spiral. And I wasn't able to catch myself immediately in the thought. I let that thought drag me into the depths of my own shadows until I realized, I was like, whoa, I had kind of this pattern interrupt and realized what was happening. And so it happens to us, right? It's part of the human experience. But can we bring awareness? Can we allow ourselves to go, oh, that's a thought. I'm not attaching to that. I'm allowing it to release. And the more that you can be in practice of that, you can get to a space where this mind is a little more quiet, and you can start to then be in communion, be in relationship with your higher mind. And what you'll notice is your higher mind isn't restrictive, right? It's not going to bring you into the shadowy depths. It's going to feel it's going to feel expansive. It's going to feel like your heart is opening and surrendering and softening. It's going to feel loving. It's going to feel joyful, right? And so you tune into the frequency of the information that's coming in. And through tuning into that frequency is when you can really start to go, okay, this is egoic mind, right? This is higher mind. And the more that you start paying attention, right, it's all about where your attention is going. You can start to rewire the process of how you tap into and where you reside in most of your day, right? In the ego mind, in the higher mind. And it's never going to be one or the other to 100%, right? We're going to fluctuate through that. And so that's just a little of my own personal experience with understanding the egoic mind versus the higher mind.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm actually hearing Diana quite loudly here as you're speaking, and we can bring her in. And she's really wanting to speak more into some of this context around what you're sharing around the different levels of mind, and how when we work with the quote unquote ego mind, or this level of human mind, through practices like meditation or focusing, concentration, how it actually begins to create this channel or this opening that is gradually connecting and making a pathway to so that there is an open communication between these levels or these dimensionalities between the third dimension and 13th dimension, so that frequency of the higher mind or the higher self becomes one with the quote unquote egoic mind. And there actually becomes less and less separation the more we're allowing what is to simply be, without, like you're saying, like without kind of these interrupts or these attachments into hooking into the flow of it. It's like if you think about like a drain getting clogged with hair or something. Like if we allow all this hair to kind of get stuck, have these thought forms get stuck, then we're not having this clear connection between the higher self mind and the human mind. But the more we kind of keep the drain open and clear, then we're actually allowing for it to really be one and the same. And that's really what she's saying. And I'd love to just maybe even bring her in, unless you have anything else you wanted to add to that. But it feels like a good time as she's kind of banging at the door here, making it really hard to concentrate on anything else.
Yeah, I say we bring her in. I would love
Great.
to hear. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for those that are new or catching this for the first time, I am a trance channel, which means that I allow a specific being named Diana, who is a Pleiadian, and she is from the 13th dimensional field, to come in. We have a relationship, so this isn't just like I'm letting anyone in. Her and I have a little bit of a contract or an agreement here that we made prior to me coming onto this planet, that we would be in relation in this particular way. So when I bring her in, I typically take a little bit of a back seat, and she comes in and just borrows my body for a little bit and gets to share with all of you the Pleiadian frequency and the Pleiadian healing energy and the love and the humor and the joy and everything that comes with it. So I know you guys are going to enjoy it, and I love the banter and the flow between Shiloh and Diana as well. So if that all feels good, I'll go ahead and go right out, and we'll put you in touch with the Pleiadians.
Amazing.
Great. Here we go. Well, greetings. This is Diana. You are at the Pleiadian family. You see, we had a little bit of an introduction, you see, so we do not need to go all to the nitty-gritty today, you see. But we do need to take a sip of the earth, you see, because this is really, this is becoming my little thing, you see, the little what you call the stamp, you see. We know this is Diana. You see, she takes 2 sips of the earth, you see. So we are going to say thank you to the Ava for the communion. You see, we are going to see what we have in the cup today, you see. One moment.
Welcome, Diana. It's such a blessing to be here with you.
Well, thank you, my dear. It's always quite a special privilege to be in relation with you as well. You see, we love the conversation so far. You see, we are enjoying this little bit of a beverage here. We are believing it is cacao today. Very nice, you see. Well, very good. And what are we going to talk about today? You want to know about a higher mind, lower mind, like they are 2 different things. You see, this is really fascinating for 13th dimension. You see, so another part, you see, to understand is you're talking about 13th dimension and higher self. And what we can say about that is it's also because in the 13th dimension, the way that the pattern is moving, you see, we are able to see more of the fold. You see, we are literally able to see more of the fold laid out, like when you're rolling out the red carpet. You see, we can see what the path goes. You see a little bit more clearly than just 3rd dimension. You see, you're only seeing a little bit, but we can see 10 more dimensionalities, 10 more of the bend. You see, so we're getting to see a little bit more of where you go if you go that way, a little bit more if you go where you go that way. You see, things like this. You see, so a little bit more clarity. You see, not the whole story, you see, but a little more clarity, you see. So it is really fun, you see, but it is really, when you are working with the human mind, very interesting to separate the way that you are doing. We understand it. We understand because you are really trying so hard. Your human minds really, really want to just make it fit in the human mind box. You see, we really understand this desire, you see. Very hilarious because you cannot do. Cannot do it. Not the way the design is meant to be, you see. So you can try and try and try. You put all these podcasts together. You put all these very, very smart humans together. Spend lots of time in the mind frequency. Lots of time figuring it all out. Very good and very charismatic and can talk very well. You see, very, very, very interesting to hear. And lots of people like it. Very good mind candy. You see, the best kind, you see. Very, very like the Belgian chocolate. Just delicious, melt in your mouth mind candy. You see, this is what you have here in your human world. You see, you have geniuses that really just make it all make sense. You say, oh yes, I will follow that guru because wow, they are just so, they really got it figured out. You see, they just figured it all out, the way they're able to articulate this particular concept, you see, and just put it all in a nice neat box with a little ribbon, little bow. You see, we like it. You see, it just fits so cleanly. You see, so we follow them. You see, we listen to them. We follow their podcast. We see with their website, we do the click, click, click and see what else they have to say. You see, we like it. You see, but this is really limiting. You see, really limiting because we are not really just the mind. We are really, really more than that. You see, so it's fine to want to understand in the mind. You see, but you have, at some point, have to be willing to jump off the cliff and let yourself blow yourself up a little bit, you see. We were talking about this before a little bit in a little bit of a joking way, you see, because it is really uncomfortable to allow yourself to go beyond the mind, because it goes into this place where you are asking yourself to just simply trust the places where it does not make sense, it does not have an answer, feels a little dark, a little scary, going into places maybe you're afraid of the dark, you see, you don't want to go in there, you see, well, it does not really have a clear answer, you see, or does not fit within the paradigm you've been told, you see, growing up, whatever it may be, you see. So we are really working within this paradoxical way of being in the world where everyone trying to find their box, you see, and make it work for them, you see. And we can do in a certain way, and we can say certain things that will be placate the mind. Will be very, oh, thank you, Diana. You really helped me understanding the mind. Thank you so much, you see. But are we really doing you a service if we do that, you see? Because we are really putting a cap on it. We are putting a cap on your experience as a multidimensional being, you see, by saying, okay, let's just figure all this out in the mind. We'll stop for today. We are leaving you hanging on all the rest of the dimensionality of who you are. So isn't that fascinating and really frustrating?
It's so fascinating. And, you know, this is, I love how you just spoke into that as well, right? Like trying to fit it into the box of the human mind. And we so want the understanding of the universe to fit in the box of the human mind. And it just, there's no possible way that it could, you know. And something that I was sharing in the beginning was, I feel like as we evolve, right, as more strands of DNA start to plug in, the mind will start to expand to understand a little more and a little more. But there's no way that we could ever fully process what the truth of our reality is. And I don't think that the design was ever meant to be that way.
Yes, you are right in a certain way. You see, what we'll say is that we have the capacity to be in relationship with all creation, with all of our versions, multidimensionality, the subtleness of it all, you see. It is simply where you choose to play in consciousness, you see. This is the part, you see. So primarily speaking, you see, most of those who are listening here, we are on the tuning, we are tuning into the radio frequency here, third dimension. So all the energies put on number 3, you see, primarily, you see. So the brain puts out all the other aspects of creation, which is yourself, you see. So you are just tuning, like we've done this a little bit before, but if you were just to tune into your right eyeball, for a second, just everybody think about your right eyeball, you see. Hopefully everyone on this show has one, you see, not having a glass eye, for example. But if you have a glass eye, tune into your glass eye, you see. Then we can cover everyone, you see, hopefully. Tune into that area. Well, what about your left toe on the left foot, you see? Well, what about that? You weren't thinking about that, were you? You were thinking over here. You see, so it's kind of like that, you see. It doesn't mean that it does not exist, you see, but it is really where are you putting your consciousness, your focus, your awareness, you see. And that is where we are talking about the free will conversation, is simply where are you choosing to focus the frequency, focus the energetics for the intent of creation. Because you are here as a creator, a master creator who is always working in creation. That is really the whole design, you see. So all your thoughts, creating. All your emotions, creating. All your feelings, all your desires, create. That's what you are doing all day long. Whether you recognize it or not, that is what's happening. You are creating, you see. So where you're putting the frequency and the attention, you see, that is where you are, what you are choosing where you are putting your Picasso. You are putting all your beautiful your artwork right in that area of creation, you see, and you're experiencing it, you see. So if you choose to put energy to a different place, you see, well, then you'll have a different experience and a different moment of consciousness. But it is possible to put more equal attention on some of the higher dimensions, lower dimensions, inside the emptiness, outside the something. All you have so many options of places to go in consciousness, you see. But it is really what is up to you, you see. And this is really where you want to go, you see. So you want to talk about the my will versus thy will, you see. And you like to separate, again, you see, well, we'll put God over here, We'll put the human over here. And we'll say, well, those are very separate things, you see. And never the two shall meet, you see. Well, at least in some tradition, this is the way. We cannot call ourselves God, you see, because that is blasphemy, you see. We do not want to step on anybody's toes who really genuinely has that belief system. You see, it's okay to have that belief system. There's nothing wrong with it, you see. What we'll say, though, is that there are other options of other options within the spectrum of creation, you see, where we honor the focus of every aspect of creation, every soul, every fractal, as containing the blueprint of the divine God, whatever you want to call it, you see. The master creation is micro, macro all together, you see. So what is happening on the smallest molecule is what is happening on the whole, you see. And that is in the design. So whatever words you want to use that you feel comfortable using, you see, to describe that phenomena is what you feel comfortable with. And some people have very, very hard time with that because of their upbringing. Maybe they were taught that you do not mix God with the human. You see, there are very separate things, you see. The human is this very sinner person who is doomed for hell, for example, you see. And God is the only savior kind of thing, you see. And this is one spectrum of belief system, you see. But even within that, you see, there is what you could consider a strand where it would be Christ consciousness within the human form, you see, where there is still a way that there is that connective thread, you see. So we're trying to merge here the belief systems, you see, so that everyone can have a starting point for the conversation, you see, because the truth of the matter is that there is no separation. There is no separation between what you consider God, what you consider source or spirit, divine will, whatever it is, and quote unquote my will. They are not so far apart, you see. And this is really the point, is that when we are having this conversation of ego will versus higher self, or divine will versus my will, you see, well, where do the two meet, you see? What is the difference? Why do it feel so far apart here on third dimension, you see? A little bit what you were talking there about the ability to have the free will choice point to be able to move across consciousness, you see. And then you get to have that choice point, and then all of a sudden you have all this stuff lighting up all over the place, you see, because now we're going to go in that direction. But you can always choose a new direction and light up another place, you see, light up another opportunity, you see. So this is the place where we always get to choose in creation. What we don't understand, though, is that we are actually the God mind having the experience as the divine will in both options, you see. We are both the divine will and the my will all at once, you see, but we are separating as if it were two different things. Isn't that fascinating?
It's so fascinating. And just as you're sharing that, you know, there's a part of me that's like, well, yes, of course. And then there's the human mind part of me where, you know, I want to understand that a little more of, say we're looking at it through the lens of separation, right? The third dimension, how they kind of feel a little bit far apart, and understanding how, right, we can hold the paradox of unity, of oneness, of just being an extension of God and also having our individual experience. Would you say that there's times where we will choose the my will path, even though it still is thy will, but it's more of the ego mind making the choice? And then sometimes we're really being called to, or maybe more times than not, then surrender more into the divine will path, or it's all divine will because any choice that we make, the divine design is created off of that.
Yes, you see, it's always divine will, you see, because we are all divine, you see.
Yeah.
And that's the part. It's like when you when you believe yourself to be separate from divine will, you see, well, then you get to have that experience. You see, you get to play along with that idea, you see. That is the beauty of this pattern, is you get to actually have whatever experience you like, you see. So if you would like to move with the frequency that you are divine will unfolding, you see, and that all choice points are coming through that frequency, 13th dimension, 33rd dimension, infinite dimension, wherever you want to land with it. It does not matter, you see, but it is frequency consciousness unfolding divine will, you see. The more aligned you are with that, the less you are in resistance, more in the flow of it all, you see. There's very little distinction made here, you see, because you are simply in the flow of divine will unfolding. When you are very committed to the egoic persona of Shiloh's body, having a direct experience, and you are very, very concentrated in the density, and you are very committed to a certain experience, well, you get to play that out as well, you see. So then you get to say, okay, well, Shiloh would like to do this, and you can force whatever it is that you want, because that is how powerful you are. You can force a will that appears perhaps a little bit like separate from what quote unquote divine will. But it is not, because you are still divine, but you are pretending to not be. That is the beauty of it. You are just having a moment where you're like, let's just play this game a little bit and see if we just pretend that we are going to be a human that is a sinner, that is completely disconnected from God, or that we have a savior God, and we're just going to play over here a little bit and see what happens, you see. And you can go down this rabbit hole, you see. You can say, oh, well, everyone around me that does not believe what I believe, they're all going to hell, we better go save them all, you see. We're going to go have this experience, and very committed to the story, you see. And this is just one example. We do not mean to offend, you see, but we are going to use it because it is alive, you see, right now in the moment. So we apologize if anybody is getting offended and you're ready to push the off button. It's okay, you see. But really stick with me a little bit. You will understand, you see, because you are so powerful that you are able to really have this experience of playing hide and seek, so sort of like you are like, we're just going to pretend that this divine will is just an illusion, you see, and that my will gets to play over here. And you can do it the other way as well, you see, where you're like, this is my will. What is my will? Who am I anyway, you see? And you go into this whole thing where you're like, well, we're just going to pretend that we are just enlightened and play this role, you see, and where we are just completely connected to divine will, and there is no separation. We are all one, and we are completely connected to the one, you see. And then you are playing in this frequency where it is all just a flow, you see, and this is really, that is the thing, you see. But most of us play somewhere in the middle, you see, where it's like we're a little bit of aware there's a divine will, but it's very obvious that there is sometimes where it is very much my quote unquote will. And where is the distinction, you see? But it is really these moments of giving more attention to the quote unquote my than to the divine, you see, and really missing the creator in it all, meaning that you are giving more attention to the vessel of the fractal, my, meaning your body, whatever your name is, whatever you come from. You're giving a lot of energetics to that version of reality as the be all and all in that particular moment, you see, and giving it more attention. So it is more alive in the field, you see. So it is getting to have its experience, you see, and you are getting to choose. You, meaning divine will, is still choosing to play out the appearance that you are getting to choose separate from divine will. But it is really not what's happening, you see, because it is still connected, even when you believe it not to be. Even when you believe you are this egoic being having a my will moment, you see. We'll say, well, how do I know that this intuitive moment here is just not, is my ego, you see, versus how do I know it is not coming from straight from source, you see. Another big question, you see. Same thing, you see. So it is all God. It is all divine, you see. So it is all the angularity and perspective that particular soul is choosing to have in that particular moment, you see. And it may seem like a quote unquote lower choice because certain things have a certain response or have a certain impact or a certain result, you see, because you choose a certain point on the pattern. Well, then that pattern lights up and you get to go down the road and play it, you see. So sometimes that comes with repercussions, karmic actions, interactions with other people, good, bad, or ugly, or great, you see. But these are moments of choice point that this apparent ego makes that feels separate from divine because it seems like a quote unquote darker path, or seems like like we missed the mark, or we had some sin, or we had a little bit of falling out, or these things that seem negative begin to happen. And you're like, well, that clearly was not God, you see, because look at all this shit that just happened, you see. So this must have been the wrong move, you see, or it is not from divine. This was definitely not divine will, you see, because look at what happened, you see. This is very easy to do, you see. It must have been the ego, you see. But if we go to that level, you see, well, if anything that happens that is not to our liking is now all of the sudden ego, and then the only things that are divine are when they go perfectly, just the plan, again, to the ego's plan, right? You see, that those are the things that are divine, you see. But if it's an ego plan and it goes not the way that the ego wanted, well, then that's an ego we'll give that all, that is all owned by the ego. But we could give the things to God that go the way that the ego like, you see. This is not the way, you see, because they are both egoic, you see, in that way, you see. But it is still divine will, you see, because you are divine. We cannot, no matter which way you look at it, it does not go away. That part never leaves, you see. And so it is like, no matter how hard you try to separate yourself from it, no matter how far you feel, you see, you can never disconnect the divine light within yourself. It cannot go away, you see. It cannot be possible. There are just the ways that you get to play it out, you see, the ways that you get to play, and you get to play it a lot of different ways, and you can really create an experience that feels very separate from God, very separate from the divine, because it feels very, very dark or very, very negative or very, very could not possibly be God, you see, because of look at all the pain and the suffering that is created here, you see. So must be definitely not divine will, must be God, must be egoic will, must be my will, you see, because we have decided that these are separate things. But really, in the reality of it all, it is simply divine will unfolding through fractal preferences in moments where we say, okay, let's see what happens. You see, go this way, you see. But it is still divine. You are divine. So it is really fascinating when we get to have the illusion that we are separate from God, when we are separate from the divine mind. But it is really the divine mind playing out all of it, you see. And the more we get to just ride along with it, even when we quote unquote say we are having this experience, you see, recognizing that it is divine mind. You are a divine mind, you see. And that is a little bit of a hard jump for some people to get into that frequency, because it feels almost blasphemous depending on if they have a religious background, especially, you see. Very hard jump for some people, you see. But it is really a deeper understanding of the flow. And if you need to take out the word God, do it, you see. Make it make sense for you, because again, the mind is only one layer, you see, because you are of infinite multidimensionality, you see. So begin to allow yourself to play in the bigger conversation. And then you get to play in all the different realms that it can really exist in. We are talking a lot, my dear. We'd like to hear from you.
Well, that's so powerful. And I love the way that you explain that, Diana. And it's interesting just the way that you were explaining, right, divine mind and ego mind, because the way that I perceive my own reality, my own experiences would almost be opposite of what you had expressed. So I'll give you an example, and opposite, and it's exactly the same as what you're expressing as well, right? It's just like two sides of the same coin, in the sense of, right, if I have something that I truly want and it starts to not go my way, I then look at that as, oh, this must be divine will, because my ego wants this thing, or this this reality, or it wants my life to go in this direction, but this direction is falling apart, the road is being dismantled. And so clearly that wasn't my highest path, and my ego was actually wanting that. And divine will, God is actually pulling me in this direction that I don't really want to go in, but I can see that it is my higher path, but it's a little more uncomfortable. And I want to go over here, but I can feel I'm being called over there. And I think in my own experience, that's where, like, it feels separate, but it also feels like I also know in the depths of my being that I am, an extension of God, and we are all one. And I very much know that, hey, I want this thing over here, but clearly I can't have this thing over here, or it's not meant to be, not meant to have this thing over there. And I have to surrender and detach and let that thing go, because I'm actually being brought, like, the message that I've received before is God actually has bigger plans for me, or divine will actually has bigger plans for me. And I have to trust that. And so it's understanding that I am in co-creation. I am the creator and in co-creation of, into the surrendering of thy will. And so what I'm hearing is it's all thy will. It's all, it's all divine will. It's all thy will is what I'm hearing from you.
Precisely, my dear. And very well said. We love that you give the counterpoint for that story, you see, because it gives perspective for a lot of people. So very well done. This is what we love about this relationship here. Very good, you see. And what we'll say is that, yes, all divine will, all possibilities, you see. And in that, you see, there is still a deeper sense with we all come as fractals of consciousness. You see, you could also call it the soul. You see, however you want to word that, you see, but the individuated consciousness, right? Individuated. So we have this experience within the multidimensionality of the union. You see, we also have the experience of all of these apparent separate fractals bouncing around in consciousness, you see, choosing other pathways, you see. And there are particular souls, you see, that kind of have an idea where they're going, you see. So it's like you might have a place where you bounce around here or there just to have a little bit, say, okay, well, we're going there or over here, but let's just see what happens if we to go this way to get there, you see. And sometimes you go take the straight shot, you see. And other times you go a little bit meandering, you want to go smell the flowers in the meadow. But then all of a sudden you're smelling the flowers in the meadow, and then you're like, oh, look at that forest over there. You see a little bit of dark forest, but it looks very intriguing. And you hear maybe an owl over there, and you just get over to the forest, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is very intriguing, you see. And then you take a few steps in the forest, you're like, oh, should we go this way, you see. And then all of a sudden you're away over all the way in left field, you see, or right field, and you're trying to get back to the original place where your soul was going, you see. And so sometimes there is course correct, but it is course correct from you see. It is your own course correct, you see. So it is not, again, a separate God having a will that is bigger or better than you. You see, it is still you choosing what your path, what pathway you actually want to do in this particular realm of consciousness, you see. So you still come in with a little, we won't call it even destiny, because there is more apparent free will than that, you see. There is still movement in consciousness, and there is still every other freaking fractal in the consciousness. So you have friends, you have family, you have other players in the field, you see. So we are all working together, making our choice points together, you see. So any one decision can impact the way that this all goes, you see. But there is still a general sense we're coming together with specific people that we love, know, like, maybe don't like so much, but we're still making some agreements here to go and play a little bit in consciousness, you see, for a particular outcome or desired experience, you see. So you go and you play that experience out, you see, and then all of a sudden you see what you're like, wait a minute, I thought we were going to go do this, you see. Oh yeah, we're over listening to the owl in the dark woods, you see. Well, come back over here, you silly Billy. Let's go play over here again. Remember what we're doing over here. So you kind of like that, you see, you're all playing tag in the field with the children. And child says, what are you doing? I thought we were playing tag. You say, well, I was playing hide and seek over here. Well, you're silly Billy. You're going to get tagged if you're trying to play hide and seek, because we're not playing that game. So come back over here. You see, so it is kind of simple like that. It is not really that complex. You say, oh, we can chalk it up to, oh, the God has much bigger plans than I can see, you see. But again, you're separating out the human from God. You are separating out this ego versus God, but it is all one, you see. It is all the same. We just have different perspective on it, you see. So again, when you talk about higher self, you see another angularity on the bigger perspective here was helpful, you see, and it's just another way of really moving through consciousness, you see. But it is really important that we begin to put less distinction on having a separate I that is separate from a divine creator, you see, that we really start seeing and viewing ourselves as the master creators that we are, you see, and really beginning to work more consciously on the spectrum of creation, creating what it is we desire in a very conscious way. Because right now we're kind of doing it a little haphazardly. Some of us are like a little bit turned on, little spiritual. You see, we have our podcast that we like to do. We'll go to these all hip retreats that are spiritual, or we go and do this spiritual thing or that spiritual thing, and we're all hip with it, you see. but really just enough to kind of get us in trouble a little bit sometime, you see. But it was really important that we really understand, and by trouble, we can never get in really trouble because it is all fun, you see. It is never a wrong move, you see. That is the beautiful part. But we are just joking around a little bit because it can seem like trouble if you are going to hang out in the spiritual ego and decide that really you're going to have this experience. But sometimes it is going to be God's fault. Sometimes it's going to be our fault. And by fault, we mean it can also be a good thing, right? Like that it's our responsibility, or we did it, or sometimes it's God's doing, you see. We can kind of separate it out like that, but really we are the co-creators and the masters of our own reality and our own destiny points, and we are the ones choosing. So to take more co-creative ownership of that which we are experiencing in our world, whether it goes sideways, left ways, right ways, upwards, downwards, we are the ones that are moving consciousness into reality, into creative motion. You see, you are the creator of your universe. And we know you can hear this in the new age terms, but do you actually know what you're doing? Do you actually know what you're doing? And this is the point in consciousness that we are all moving into, is having not only the understanding intellectually of what it means to be the co-creator of your reality, but to actually know what the heck you are doing, so that you are creating in a much more fluid way what it is that you are choosing to experience within the waves of creation itself, you see. So you have this over here, God over here, you over here, and then sometimes God's fault, sometimes your fault, you see. But if we just recognize that they are the same exact thing, you cannot separate it out. Well, then all of a sudden, now you are taking the conscious, you're in the driver's seat of your own reality, and you are not blaming anyone else outside yourself, including God, including the divine will, you see. You are actually owning it, and you are actually saying, okay, we are going here, you see, and understanding by we are really talking about the co-collective of consciousness, you see. And you are on the ride, you see, but to really do it in a more conscious way and recognizing your role in it all, you see. And recognizing too that you get to play along the way, and that if you're, I'll say, okay, we're going right here, recognizing what is speaking right now. What is speaking that is making this choice point that we are going to go here? We're going to go and make $1 million this year right now. You see, well, who is making the million? You see, what is talking, and from what level, what dimension of consciousness, you see? And are you giving equal proportionate relation to the infinite levels of dimensionality that are allowing for all possibility to exist, you see? And taking into consideration at least 13 up, you see, so that you are at least in alignment with your higher self, you see, because then you are really in tune with the overarching directionality of your soul's journey, you see. Because that part you've already kind of figured out, you see. You say, okay, we're going to, this soul is going to do this journey here on the third dimension called Earth, going to basically go around here, you see. How we get there, that's, we're going to leave that part, the fun part, you see, the mystery a little bit. But recognizing that there is still this play happening. So what comes up for you, my dear, when you hear all of that?
Yeah, what's coming up is that, you know, a big part of what you're sharing is really bringing conscious awareness and accountability and responsibility for your own life and what you're creating. And in that, I can just feel this sense of empowerment in that for the collective of, oh, wow, I am in the driver's seat, and I am in this co-creation, co-weaving with not only God, but the collective, as you're saying, right? We have all these other friends, all of these other fractals that are also in this experience together. And I think that's why it's so powerful when a group of people, or, you know, I've even seen through, you know, like mass meditations or something on that level of a group of people coming together with one vision, and how that level can create and open up higher levels of timelines and dimensionality, and how we are that powerful. And I think that a lot of people, because what I was also hearing, right, is really coming into conscious awareness that we're creators. And I think that in the human experience, we so tend to fall back asleep. And this is something that I've really been working on in my own life. And I actually set alarms on my phone. I call them pattern interrupts, to kind of snap me out of whatever I'm in throughout the day, and to really take a moment of like, am I present? Am I consciously aware? Am I consciously creating my reality right now? Or am I falling back into maybe old subconscious programmings where you're maybe more a little unconscious, asleep, maybe kind of stuck in the past, or whatever it may be, or worrying about the future, right? These are human tendencies where a lot of people can kind of get stuck in, where they don't even realize they're a creator because they're still living in the past, or they're worrying about the future, and they're not even actually consciously present to go, what do I want to create next? And so they're kind of like asleep, almost like unplugged a little bit. And so it's really coming back into the remembrance of that we are powerful creators, and to take time each day to be consciously present and really get clear on what is it that I want to create today, in a week's time, a year's time. Like, what are the higher visions, and how can I embody that right now in this present moment?
Yes, my dear. And also having the active relationship with your higher self, you see, to really make sure that when all of these questions are being asked, you see, because what you are speaking to, you see, the worrying, the past, the present, sleep, unconscious, all of these frequencies, giving all the attention into the third dimension, you see, giving all the attention into the human earth experience, you see, not giving any attention to dimensionalities 4, 5, 6, all the way to 13, you see. So there is no conscious relationship with the higher self. You see, so you're not even aware of where your soul is going, where your soul is wanting to go, because you are disconnected from the higher aspects of you. You see, you're disconnected from the fullness of who you are. You see, so you are disconnected from the even the information of where it is that you're trying to go, because you have forgotten a little bit about the overarching soul journey that you agreed to, you see. You still get to play in that, and that is still perfect. That what they're experiencing. You say, okay, we're going to go forget a little bit. We're going to go maybe to do some beach lounging. You see, sipping some margaritas, whatever the case may be. You see, there's a part of it for people. You see, and so we're not here to judge it or to say, oh, you better hurry up. You see, we got to be the spiritual ones. We got to get on it. We got to be enlightened. You see, no, that's not what it is about. It's just the experience. Period. You see. Having the play consciousness, you see, so giving a little bit of giving a little grace in the whole storyline, you see, that it is okay, wherever you are is exactly where you are, you see. So it's where you meant to be, because it's where you are. So there is no question there. There's no guessing there, you see. So it is really developing that relationship with you. You see, you knowing you see. So opening up the communication lines with your 13th dimension, by simply putting more awareness and attention there. Even if you feel like you're imagining it or you're making it up, you see, just simply thinking about, I wonder what my higher self look like. I wonder what it feels like to be a higher self, you see. And I wonder what they like to do, you see. I wonder what they do all day, you see. And just starting to even just ask the questions, you see. If I were a higher self, what would I do all day? Would I be sipping the margarita? Would I be on the beach? Would I be going on the zip line through the jungle? What would I be doing in the higher self, you see? And asking these questions, you see. Maybe we go traveling to do star hopping, you see. Just hop around the stars, you see. Who knows what we'd want to do? But just getting the curiosity around your higher self, if you do not have an active relationship with it. You already had an active relationship with it, well, then you know when you are in that fluid open communion, you see, when there is open circuitry, when there's open circuitry between you and your higher self, then everything is flowing in a way where you are on the path of your soul's journey, and there is no bump down the road, because you are clear in where you're going, because you are on the same page. All the versions of you are aligned. And so you are moving forward with the confidence, you see. If you are disconnected from your higher self, you're disconnected from parts of yourself, then there are parts of you wondering, am I making the right decision? Am I going the right direction? I don't know. Is this my higher self? Is this my lower self? Is this the ego mind? Is this divine will, thy will? What the heck is going on, you see? Because there is disconnection there is fractalization going on even within the individualized fractal. So we want to bring wholeness to the fractal of consciousness that is you, so that there is clarity. You can be a bright, shining little gem, you see, in the fractal of consciousness that is clear what you are experiencing. Then we all get to revel and be in awe of this clear gemstone within the fractal of consciousness that gets to understand what it is here for, what it is doing, you see. And we get to really just be, wow, we get to dance alongside you and be like, oh, go you see, go you are really doing it. You are really doing earth really great, you see, and really being a good version of yourself, you see, and really getting to honor one another in that way. So it's kind of like that, you see. So it's really developing that relationship with the different dimensionalities of who you are, not giving all the attention to third dimension. You see, it's starting to spread out the frequency a little bit, getting to be more aware of all the different dimensionalities, especially up to 13, because then that relationship is active and alive. And then all the questions about where you're going, what you're doing, who you are, why you're here, all the things. Am I doing the right thing? Am I going the right directions? Am I making the right decision? Is this my intuition? Is this my higher self? Is this God? Is this me? All those things become less questions, you see, because you're actually not entertaining on the frequency of the mind anymore. You're not having these wonderings because you are connected into 13th dimension, which is not the mind frequency, actually. It is beyond the mind, you see. So then you are in a different relationship with yourself. You are not needing to figure everything out in the mind, and you are in the active relationship within the frequency and the movement of consciousness in a much more coherent and an accurate way, we will even say. You see, that it is really the movement of the flow of who you are and why you're here, but just begins to be a fluid movement, you see, with less disruption in the field, or less jarring this way or that way. And again, there is no wrong way, you see, because that is part of the soul's journey to have the appearance or the illusion of fractalization within the whole, within the fractal itself, you see. So sometimes we go and we say, okay, we're going to cut it off in layer 7 and layer 8 and layer 9, or something like this. You see, different dimensions going to have a little bit of trouble getting to 13. We're going to play that out for X amount of time, you see, and we're going to go all over here and do all these kind of things instead, you see, just to have a little bit of a side track, you see, a little bite to eat on the side. Okay, you see, but really the soul journey goes a specific way, you see. So it is really like that, where you get more in relation with who you are, bringing wholeness to your soul. Is this making sense to you, my dear?
It's making so much sense. And I was giggling earlier because when you were talking about
what are we cracking a good joke for you?
Yes, with that, what is my higher self doing today? I had this vision of my higher self like on a cosmic zip line, just having like the time of her life up there, and it was, you know, pretty comical. But you know, all of that is so incredibly powerful. And you know, I just want to share a little bit about my own experience with what you're talking about, right? Of really connecting with higher self and expanding through the multidimensionality of who you are. And, you know, my experience in that has been, you know, and I've had, you know, I've heard a lot about, you know, spiritual bypassing or this and that. And I think that there's a lot of maybe misunderstanding in what that actually means.
Oh, this is a good one. Yes.
Yes. And what that actually means. And what I mean by that is, I feel like the biggest expansion that I've had in my life and my journey has been the embodiment of higher self. But it's not about staying up at the 13th chakra point or the 13th dimension. It's about, I just want to share this because I think it's important. It's about embodying that frequency in the human experience. And what that has done is that has brought me into such a deep level, like how I was speaking of earlier, you know, of people not being conscious, not being in awareness, not being present. That used to be me. I feel like I used to be floating around in outer space most of my life. And that was really through a trauma response, right, from childhood. And so not feeling safe in my body. And through the embodiment of my higher self and these higher expressions of reality, I've actually been able to expand my bandwidth to hold more of that frequency here in the human experience. And it's brought me into radical presence. It's brought me into an empowered state where I am clear. I do feel like I'm very clear on my next steps forward, and understanding that I'm the creator of my own reality. And I've really taken the reins of my own life, and no longer being a victim, but I'm going to be in the driver's seat and really, step into the desired reality that I wish to create here for myself, and then show everyone else what is possible with that. And so when we're speaking of, embodying or tapping into these higher frequencies, sometimes I astral travel and I go right out and I connect into these higher realms. And then it's about coming back in the embodiment of really grounding that frequency into the body, because I think that people don't understand that the humanness of us is actually way more technology advanced through our DNA and through our chakra points and our subtle bodies. It can hold much more light than what most of people are walking around with. And so they look at, oh, if you're embodying light, or the unity, or whatever concept of that is, you're disassociating from the human experience. But embodying that level of light is really bringing us more into the power that we yield in our human form.
Precisely, my dear. That's literally what a human means. Hue is a frequency of light. You see, hue, man. You see, it's really the consciousness of light. Coming into the physicality of the form. You see, is really the definition of what it means to be a human, is to have the embodiment of light. You see, so just to clear that up. You see, and then you're talking about the bypassing. Well, what is passing you by? What is passing you by, and who is the you that is having something pass by, you see? Because these are really the questions, you see, that we get to ask, you see, because that you can pretend that we are allowing something to pass by, but it is really us going over here and saying, oh, I do not see it, I do not see it, I do not see God there. No, God is not there, you see, we're going to bypass, you see. Well, really, it is everywhere. Light is, you see, God is, you see, frequency is, you see. So it is really, again, where are you putting your awareness, you see, your attention, you see. And yes, we talk about the ascension journey. Well, what is happening on ascension journey, you see, is not leaving human, because human is the light embodied, you see. And so what is really asking from all of you really is to embody more of yourself, you see, to bring more light into the human experience, bring more light into the density, you see, not to say goodbye to the density, but to have a new experience. You see, that is really collectively what you are all up to these days. You see, well, we've had a lot of the density, we understand this version, you see. So now let's see what happens when we all choose to bring a little bit more light into the density and play in that realm, where we still get to keep the body, but we're going to do it in a way that almost feels more energetic. You see, this is where it all goes. You see, that's what we're doing here in Pleiades. You see, still have some form, you see, but much less density, you see. So it is like that, where you get to play on the different levels, you see, but it is really a deeper knowing of yourself. You see, it is a deeper understanding of your fractal of consciousness, because you are now aware of all the different hues, you see, the hues of being human, you see, the different levels of light, you see, because there are subtle variations of light that you get to work with and be aware of, you see. And then all of a sudden your perspective shifts, because, oh, now you're getting to see yourself through that afternoon sun, you see, late fall afternoon sun, where you get to see it. It's a very soft frequency, you see. Oh, we did not know that one existed, you see. And now all of a sudden you're having all these different experiences of you see, because you have simply allowed consciousness to expand into it, into what is already there. It's the same as what we were talking about with the brain and the neurons, you see, or the movement of consciousness in and of itself, you see. All exists, everything is. You see, so ascension is not anything new. You see, there's not anything new to discover, or anything new to happen, or anything new to create. Everything's already created, you see. But what you're choosing is what to enliven, what to bring light to, what to bring consciousness to, awareness to. So you're choosing where to bring light, what areas to bring light to. So you're lighting up the synapses in the brain, but all of a sudden the neurons are firing. Light is being created and creating a certain experience of consciousness. Same is true with the different dimensionalities of who you are. You see, bringing light in awareness to the different levels of light within your being. So you're bringing more awareness to the fullness of who you are. Very, very important. So that when you would say what you are spiritual bypassing, you see, well, I would question whether there is an awareness of the spirituality of the human form and a spirit, and what they are meaning by spiritual, you see. What is spiritual? Because all is spiritual, you see. You cannot leave anything out. You cannot leave any experience out and say, only this is and that is not. You say, same conversation, really, of separating out you from God, you see, you from the light, you see, it is all light, you see. You cannot have one without the other, you see. So then you have darkness, light. You say, well, what about the darkness, you see? Because, well, that is the beauty of the polarities. You get to have the experience. This is the power. This is the power of creator. You see, that you get to have the experience of pretending that something doesn't exist, you see. And this is what you could say it would be a version of bypass, you see. Pretend it does not exist in order to have a certain experience. We can give it whatever name we want to give it, you see. But it does not change the fact that it still exists, whether we give it energy and attention or not, you see. What it changes is, okay, so those neurons, those synapses, those patterns in consciousness are not active at the moment. They are not lit up, you see. They're just hanging out, waiting for any fractal to go over and shine some light on it, bring some light, bring some movement to it, activate it, bring it to life, you see. Bring creation, create it, you see. Create the movement, the flow, the sound, the light, the energy. Bring it to life, you see. You are creating your reality by the choices that you make, because you're bringing light to every area of your creation, every area of your life, every area of your multidimensionality. You see, if you decide that you are just going to be a human being who is separate from God, who is having a my will versus thy will, you see, well, then you're playing third dimension, saying, well, I'm going to play out my will, you see. And then you're having the experience, you're choosing an experience where you're going to pretend that you're separate from God and see what that happens, you see. And all of a sudden you're having these certain experiences, say, so, wow, God does not even exist, because look at all these things that are happening. You can play, many people play that out. You see the whole movement around it called atheist, right? You have all these people that believe, okay, there is no God, because look at what is the reality we're able to create, you see. And it's very, very centered in the frequency of the mind, you see. And it puts a cap on it, you see. Puts a cap on the multidimensionality, puts a cap on the experience, puts a cap on the understanding, you see, because it wants to contain it into this box, you see. Those very fascinating conversations, you see, where we can go with all of this. Is this making sense to you?
Yes, it's making total sense. And, I think that that's just a
Well, correct. Then we did not do our job. If it's making sense in the mind, then we really screwed the whole podcast up.
Well, it's making sense in my being. I can understand the truth to the aspect of what you're sharing. And I feel that so deeply as well. And I think that there's a misunderstanding that's happening in the spiritual community with spiritual bypassing itself. And the understanding of what the true ascension process actually is, and just what you're explaining of bringing more light into the human form and having more experience. It's actually turning on more of our humanity. And that, and that doesn't mean that, I think some of the things I've been seeing, right, is all of the turmoil happening on the planet, right? There's war and devastation and corruption, and there's a lot of separation happening on our planet right now. And it's really creating what I've tuned into. And, I had a moment yesterday, I sat in a breathwork session, and I had a moment where I was just dropped to my knees, where I could feel how disconnected the collective is from what we're speaking of that we are all divine will, and we are all one. And the separation that continues through, what we're seeing through the lens of, left versus right, and and whatever it may be, right, in the war, Israel versus Palestine, all of these places where people are taking sides and pointing fingers and not realizing that it's just driving more separation, and it's actually just fueling more of a disconnect of who we truly are, and that we are all one. And I could feel the amount of pain in that. And so I'm curious with, when we speak into, just everything that we're sharing around, the divine design of everything. And, I even just think of, right, how like how some prophecies are really being laid out of, even, without bringing like religion into it, but, what is it? The second book of Revelations was just found in the Vatican, and it talks about how, right, in the first book of Revelations, it's like the end times, but the second one that was just found is actually saying that there's a prophecy of peace that is coming to our planet. And so would you say that we're completely in the design of all of it? To like, what I tuned into was the amount of chaos is here, the separation is here to be a mirror to awaken us to the truth of who we are, so that we can bring more light into the human form, where yes, there's still the duality, and also maybe a new way of walking in human form where humanity does know peace.
Precisely. And we have to really be mindful of the subtle ways that we place the judgment on experience of called humanity, you see, because we have to understand that it is all playing its role. And we've had this conversation a little bit before, you see, that everything is having a very important job to play, you see. So even the places where we are seeing suffering and pain and war and quote unquote separation, you see, these are the points of consciousness where fractals come together to say we're going to choose to have this particular experience, you see, where we're going to, again, put on the blinder, pretend that there is a separation from God, just to see what the experience feels like, you see. But then we come in and we have the power as humans to give the meaning to that particular play in consciousness, you see. So we say, oh, well, that is separation, you see, or that is war, that is pain, that is tragedy, that is death and dying, you see, and we give all this meaning that is quote unquote bad or not good or not optimal, you see, and that peace is the better way, you see. And then there's something very sweet within the human form, you see, the heart space that genuinely most humans, you see, desire the peace and the beauty of the expansion, you see, back into, because it's bringing closer into the remembrance of from which it came, you see. It's like when you want to know, even those that are adopted, you see, want to know where they come from, you see, want just to know, you see. So it's almost like that, where it's like you want to know your parents, you want to know the birthplace, you want to know the origin story from that which your soul came, you see. So there is always this yearning back into the merging back into the one, the desire to know the one. And those are commonly in the frequencies of peace and love and unity. Those are moving into that place, you see. And then you can also get there, you see, in the other way, ironically, you see, but we don't really go that way very often, you see, but going into the death and the dying, into the nothing point, in the 0 point, in the opposite direction, into the death point, you see. So both ways, whether you're going to the black or the white of the oneness, you see, you can get there both ways, you see. But the joy, the pleasurable path, you see, for the humans, there is that natural desire to do. But then because of that, we often place the judgment on all of the other versions, you see, as if it's not peaceful, you see, must be wrong, must be bad, must be less than optimal, you see, rather than understanding its role for what it is, and understanding, and really, again, we're coming back to the trust point of trusting all the fractals that have decided that this is an important part of consciousness, of playing out consciousness, you see. Even to know peace, you must know war, kind of thing, you see, in the context of polarity. In the context of polarity, you see. So you can argue, you see, or all one, you see. But yes, but we are also many, you see. And in the many, you see, we choose to experience all, You see, so when we give meaning to all, that is where we can get a little bit stuck in certain places of experience where all of a sudden now we can create sides, we can create division, we can create left and right, bad and wrong and good in all these different ways that we can divide, because now we can create meaning and separation because we are in the world of polarity where that can exist, you see. It is important to recognize, you see, that it is movement on consciousness. It is movement within the flow of consciousness, you see. That it is nothing by meaning, by definition has meaning. It is all simply the movement of frequency, you see. And understanding it through that lens of everything is really the movement of frequency. You see, well, then all of a sudden, you see, we're seeing this play of war, for example. You see sides and pain and people dying, quote unquote, dying. You see, again, we have to really be willing to look at the bigger picture of it all. That these souls choose these moments in consciousness for reasons we cannot understand in the mind. You see, that every soul has chosen, every fractal chooses to experience the illusion of death and dying, you see, many times over in many different ways. Say, okay, let's try it this time. We're just going to stay in the mother womb, not even going to go out, see what that feels like, you see. Other time we're going to say, we're going to put a gun in the hand and see what that feels like. Or let's see what happens when we have it done by a family member. Or let's see what happens if we jump off the cliff. Let's see what happens if we get blown up. We want to do it in many different ways to just have the experience, but we give the meaning that this is bad. We give the meaning that, oh, pain and suffering and death is bad. It is not inherently bad, you see. It is a part of the circuitry. It is a part of experience. It is a part of being in the duality of what we call the play of consciousness, you see. So let everyone play without the judgment that it is right or wrong or good or bad, you see. That is really a level of mastery within consciousness that we are coming into, a frequency where there is simply less judgment around everything that is happening. And when we begin to simply see it and view it as a place of consciousness, well, then we begin to make choices that are a little bit more refined, because, well, we've had those experiences now. We've had the extremities, you see. And then we get to decide as we evolve in our soul's journey, the older soul so much, which you could say, you see, the ones that are just, we've blown ourselves up in a million different ways and we get it, you see. So now let's go hang out, you see, go do some zip lining on the 13th dimension for a little while, you see, whatever it looks like, you see. But we get to have different levels of experience, you see, because that is the free will piece, you see. And again, it is all in the play of sometimes we are very much in alignment of the idea that we are the creator of the reality, meaning there is no separation from this idea of conscious God or source energy and the individualized fractal. It is playing out as one cohesive unit, so to speak. Other times it feels a little bit more separate, where there is more of the ego fractal that is really choosing to just play in apparent separation. That is really the choice point, you see. But we do not have to judge the apparent separation as, oh, bad, because it is still connected to the divine. You see, it cannot be separated, you see. So we have to come into greater understanding of how the wholeness works and how we are all playing together in consciousness without giving so much judgment around it, if this makes sense to you.
Yeah, it does make sense. And it's also, right, I think we've talked about this before, of like everyone has come here to play their part, right? And everyone is playing their part and their role in this evolution of human consciousness, of what we're really moving through in this next folding, right, of the pattern, and really trusting that everything is happening just as it should be, and everyone knows what they're doing on a soul level of what we signed up to come here and have this experience at this specific time in our human journey. And so I feel like that, at least for me, brings an ease and a place of just surrender and grace into my heart of, okay, I can trust myself, I can trust my neighbor, and I can also trust that the divine design that is unfolding is all here happening for us, and that we can let go of the fear of the unknown of what is unfolding, because there is a lot of chaos that's happening around us in our collective reality. Like to not, to reject that, right, would be maybe the bypassing part of, it's very apparent of what's happening on our planet right now. And, we can really come into a deeper level of acceptance and going, okay, this is all actually happening for us. And it's here to awaken us to our deeper truth. And, that, at least for me, just, brings it a deeper level of trust and surrender into, okay, I can let go of control, of trying to control everything, in the sense of the embodiment of the divine will that is really unfolding for each and every single one of us.
Precisely. And when you're working in the right relationship with the word control, you see, you are really allowing the frequency of the divine will unfolding, you see, to be a natural extension of your human form. You see, it is all flowing from one frequency of unification, you see. So there is no differentiation then between the divine will and thy will. You see, it is one extension, and then it's a beautiful expression then from each human form that is able to work in that level of consciousness, where there is simply that pure divine flowing through of what it is choosing to experience, both collectively and individually, you see. So it's very good. This feels like a nice way to kind of tie it up with a little bow, you see, because it's really what we were saying before is that we cannot do. So we just really said, okay, we're going to try, you see. And this feels like a good place to pretend like we really got it all in the mind.
Amazing. That's perfect. Yeah. Is there anything that you want to just end with before we bring Ava back into the space?
Well, one of these days, you see, we're going to get you to crack up, do the belly laugh. You see, that's our goal. You see, is to get you laughing like that. You see, we're really going to work very hard, you see, for a good laugh.
I'm here for it.
Very good. This is all. This is a very enriching conversation. We hope that you have all enjoyed it. You see, we'll give a blessing from the Pleiadians, you see, for all of you here to really be in right relation with you as you see, to really be curious about yourself, and to be awakening to the layers within yourself, and to not shy away from it, to really own who you are, and to really feel free to express who you are in all your brilliance and radiance, because the world needs your light. So blessings to all of you from the Pleiadian family. We love you all very much.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Diana and the Living Ma, and thank you, Ava. Welcome back into the space. That was such a powerful conversation, and I'm just so grateful to be in the space with you and to have Diana here in the space as well. And I'm so grateful for all of our viewers and everyone listening. Thank you for being a part of this extraordinary journey for myself, at least. Is there anything that you want to end with, Ava?
Oh, this was really such a pleasure and a joy, and I can just all the frequencies are really here, just giving honor and blessings and smiling with the biggest smiles. So I trust that this message was exactly what you needed to hear today.
Beautiful. And if this resonates with you, then please like and subscribe to this video so that we can continue to rise together on our ascension journey.
Awesome. And we'll look forward to seeing you on next week's episode. Bye for now.
Well, bye.